Hey everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with D&D Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a man-child demanding that a Dungeons & Dragons table let him play with them, and when refused, throws a hissy fit. A story about a homophobic dungeon master that targets a player for his character being gay, and much more. But before we get into those, let's meditate with Simba to prep ourselves for the oncoming cringe. There we go. Now I think we're ready for some Dungeons & Dragons horror stories. My mom said I could play with you guys. By Reddit user, Dill Puckles. Bit of an old tale I was reminded of reading another post here. This must have been like 4+ years ago. I started a group in a friend's cafe, and we would meet every Saturday and play while just hanging out. Usually, the owner would join since he was a huge nerd. It wasn't unusual for us to get people coming up and asking what we were doing. Usually kids or young adults, asking if they could play, etc. 99% of the time, I would explain that it's unfortunately a full group, and maybe point them in a direction of an active group, like a game store, and that was it. We'd have 1 or 2 people asking if they could stay and watch, and that was usually not an issue. And then there's this guy, really big, like 6'2", 300 pounds easily. He is awkwardly hanging out just watching our table from like 30 feet away, starting to give me bad vibes, when a woman comes and they walk outside. Less than 10 minutes later, he's back inside and walks up to our table and just stands, leering over one of the girls, long enough for us to all look up at him, and he hits us with this gem. My mom said I could play with you guys. At first, I wasn't sure what to do, but after a moment, I explained that unfortunately, the game was full, but the TCG place down the road has Pathfinder Society and Adventurers League type stuff. I want to play with you though. My mom said you have to let me play. At this point, I'm starting to put pieces together, and I'm assuming he's special needs or on the spectrum or something. So I use my big brother voice and say, "Sorry buddy, we only have so many spots. If you want to hang out with us till your mom comes back, we don't mind, but you're gonna have to listen." In my head, that sounded reasonable, but he just got mad and yelled, "You have to let me play! My mom said you would!" And honestly, we were all kinda floored. One of the guys jumped in and tried to explain that his mom should have asked first and that it's not nice to demand to be part of something. But then the guy just yells, "Stop talking to me like that! Let me play or else!" I suggested we pack it up and continue next week, since we'd already been playing for about 3 hours, and none of us wanted to deal with this. But the big dude yells that we can't, that we have to let him play or else. And at this point, we're mostly ignoring him and making plans for the next session. This infuriates Big Man, and he grabs the bag of the girl he had been leering over and just yeets it across the room, shouting that we can't go, we have to let him play. It's at this point that the owner comes over and is confused and concerned. I explain the situation, and Big Guy interrupts, yelling that we have to let him play because his mom said we have to. The owner apologizes to us and tells the big man that he's going to have to leave. Cue giant man flailing and throwing a temper tantrum while trying to call his mommy. Everyone was really uncomfortable, and the place cleared out quick smart. Mommy shows up in like 5 minutes and goes right past her blubbering, chuffing, angry son to one of the employees and demands to know what happened. The owner cuts in and explains that her son caused a disturbance and was menacing and harassing some customers, and then threw a temper tantrum. He also informed her that the police had been called. She goes off, "My son was just playing a game with his friends. Why are you being mean to my son? Just give him what he wants." Pretty much any and every excuse you could think why a grown man would be allowed to act like a petulant child. I left before the cops showed up, but I heard a bunch of interesting stuff from the owner. Apparently, Big Man wasn't special needs or disabled in any way, officially. He was, apparently, a normal and functional member of society with no mental health issues. And Mom had previous run-ins with local businesses and police for dumping him places for extended periods of time and him causing trouble. Neither were arrested, but apparently they were both told not to come back to the premises. I remember asking around and finding out that the same guy was banned from pretty much every 40K and Magic the Gathering event in a 30-mile radius because his behavior was well known. Something tells me that this dude was probably on the spectrum and just never diagnosed. And it would be no wonder that he was never diagnosed with the way his mother would just drop him off places to cause trouble. Give Mother of the Year to that one. Or at least I hope it's something that's undiagnosed, as imagining a full-grown adult acting like this without anything going on makes me wonder what was going on in his head to just march to a table and demand them to let him join. And that isn't to say that it would have been an excuse if he was on the spectrum, as I know plenty of people that are, and they don't act like this at all. It's no wonder he's been banned from multiple places if he acts like that. It's like Chris Chan, but on steroids. Let's move on. Dungeon Master decides to disregard his own role because I took notes. Devolves into a group argument. By Reddit user House of Raven. This isn't a huge horror, but one small thing in a long line of shitty things that a DM has done over the course of the campaign. Among other things, our Dungeon Master starts planning our next session about 30 minutes before it's supposed to start. He plans our sessions and the storyline with his girlfriend, another one of the players, and he heavily caters to his girlfriend because she'll take out something on him outside of the game if something she doesn't like happens in-game. The girlfriend has also done quite a few really terrible things, but that might be a story for another day. I'll try to give the SparkNotes version for the incident that broke the camel's back. Through most of our party being charmed, we get lured into a location with a Fae who cornered us. The Fae expresses that they'll let us leave safely if we make a deal with them. One of us makes a deal, we need to do something for the Fae, and we get to leave in complete safety and without being harmed. Specifically, the deal we made was sealed with magic. And the stipulation was that in the event someone doesn't hold up to their end of the deal within a certain time frame, they lose their soul and die immediately. Fast forward a few sessions, and we do what we agreed to. We come back to show the Fae proof to fulfill our end of the contract, but then the Fae summons a bunch of minions to ambush us. My character then reminds the Fae of our contract and the specific terms that had been used. DM: Yeah, that didn't happen. Me: Here's exactly what happened. And I show him my notes, what specific terms were used, and what rolls we made to make sure everything was legit. DM: Well, that doesn't matter. I'm doing what I want. And we proceed to go through combat. Thankfully, we all survived, but after the session, the Dungeon Master starts making fun of me for thinking that I could use the contract to make the Fae follow the deal that he agreed to. And then the group starts complaining that I, the only person without negative charisma, never tried to talk my way out of anything. I then point out that every time I try to talk, the DM completely ignores it, doesn't allow me to roll for it, and combat starts. So the DM's girlfriend decides to call me a bad player and says that I'm not playing my character's charisma properly, and that she can always talk her way out of any situation when it comes to our game. I invite her to do the talking in the future, which she refuses. I also tell her that she doesn't know anything about my character because she's never paid any attention to anyone but her own, and she shouldn't be judging anyone for how they play their characters. She then gets in a huff and goes to her bedroom to pout. Then everyone goes our separate ways. We haven't had a session since, and I'm almost thankful that I don't have to deal with her or the DM. Well, I have to agree with OP here. The contract did say that the party could leave safely if the job was done, which it was. It sounds to me like the Dungeon Master probably forgot that when planning that session, and the fact that OP kept detailed notes, down to the numbers that everyone rolled, ruined his prep for that session. Plus, there was the snippiness from DM's girlfriend when they started arguing. Maybe it was for the best that that campaign fizzled out, because it just sounds like a whole load of tension. Let's move on. But before we do, I have to give a warning that the following story contains role-played essay. So if you would like to skip that one, you should be able to do so via the chapters on the video. But with that warning out of the way, let's get into it. Homophobic Dungeon Master kills off my cleric in a gross way. By Reddit user DifferentFerret646. I used to play Dungeons & Dragons at a local game shop before I went off to college. The group I was playing with were people I knew from the shop and would occasionally play Magic with. They introduced me to Dungeons & Dragons, and we ended up setting up a game. The Dungeon Master was part of this friendish group, although I knew him the least, as he didn't play Magic often, but he did play Dungeons & Dragons. When we were making characters, we were allowed to basically invent our own gods to worship, as long as they weren't too overpowered or broke the rules of the game. So I created a goofy, flirty, neutral, good gay cleric. He has remained one of my favorite characters to this day. But when I showed the Dungeon Master my character sheet, he looked it over, rolled his eyes, and dryly said, "A gay cleric, huh? Like you don't think a cleric might find that kind of thing sinful?" I laughed and explained to him that his religion is cool with homosexuality. He seemed annoyed, but I guess he couldn't really say no after explicitly allowing us to create our own gods and faiths. He would, however, throughout the campaign, constantly have me get attacked by, quote, holy cultists. Basically a slew of different monsters and DMPCs who fought to, quote, purify the land. They would attack my character for being gay. It got to the point of metagaming, as some of the cultists had no way of knowing my character was gay before attacking. The excuse was, quote, their gods don't approve of homosexuality, so they sent their followers to attack you. Then, of course, the random, quote, acts of the gods that nearly killed me, like random smite lightning, as the Dungeon Master called it, or, quote, holy fire. It was insane, and I almost died so many times, and would have if the party wasn't so well balanced, and I was stacked to the brim with potions. The Dungeon Master seemed obsessed. Like, I don't mind homophobic NPCs, as bigotry can add layers to the world building and impact of the story, but this was just lame and stupid. Nevertheless, the rest of the group was cool with my character, and none of us had actually died yet, so I stayed. But the fact that I hadn't died ended up pissing the Dungeon Master off, as he would make rude comments, like saying that the party was full of min-maxers and how we were, quote, abusing the potion system by using our hard-earned gold to buy extra potions to survive the Dungeon Master's homophobic murder hobo cultists. Well, the straw that broke the camel's back was when our party got ambushed by a horde of orcs that surrounded us. It was an unwinnable scenario, and very obviously so. The orcs targeted me on my turn, obviously, and downed me immediately. They downed our party's wizard too afterwards. Paladin healed me, and we tried to run on our turn, but they all took opportunity attacks, and basically TPK'd the party. Unfortunately, we weren't dead though. Man, I wish I had just died. We woke up in an orc/orog keep in the Underdark, where we were all in chains. At this point, we were all kinda jaded in real life, as we all felt railroaded by that unwinnable encounter, but at least glad that we survived. We weren't expecting what would come next. A few orcs approached our party, and the orc chieftain said, "That one," as the orcs grabbed me, stripped me down, and the chieftain, according to the Dungeon Master, quote, forces his big green cock up your ass, as the Dungeon Master laughed. I shook my head, and the Dungeon Master said, "What? You're gay. Don't you all like it up the ass?" I told him how stupid that idea is, and that gay people still want to be able to choose their sexual partners and not have sex forced on them. I also mentioned that I'm not gay in real life, since the Dungeon Master assumed I must be, because of my character. Dungeon Master then just flippantly ignored everything I said, and then began, I shit you not, calculating bludgeoning damage from the orc's penis. It was 2d6. It wasn't enough to kill me, so he had the other orcs rape my cleric too, until the bludgeoning damage was enough to kill me. I was pretty checked out at this point. The campaign ended shortly after, and I just went home. I made up some excuses as to why I couldn't play anymore, and just avoided that game store so I wouldn't have to answer as to why I wasn't playing anymore. After about 2 years, I came back and met up with some of my old friends from the game store, and got back to playing Magic, and soon Yu-Gi-Oh!, and then Dungeons & Dragons again. But I sure as hell wasn't playing anything with that Dungeon Master again. Holy crap, talk about being brazen. I don't blame OP for not going back to play with that Dungeon Master anymore. Heck, I wonder how OP was able to stick it out as long as he did. I would have said something above table the first time it was apparent that the Dungeon Master was targeting his character for being gay. It's super messed up that after the Dungeon Master couldn't kill his character off with regular means, that he set up that whole railroad and killed his character off the way he did. Hell, at that point, I would have said something to the store owner. I mean, I can only imagine what could happen if someone joined one of this Dungeon Master's games that was gay in real life. Stuff like that could discourage people to come to the store, much like it did to OP, and that's just bad for business. Thankfully though, OP reconnected with his other friends and has started playing again. Let's move on. DM NPC gets made fun of and blasts a player character. By Reddit user May1. So I figured I'd do another one of these, as I got heaps of them, and it's kinda like an Am I the A-hole post. The characters aren't really important, so I will just use class to refer to them if I need to. So the campaign is going. I've joined halfway through at level 7. The first thing to note is that there are heaps of homebrew, and less of the cool homebrew, and more of the because I said so homebrew. Anyway, we play for a bit, and I lose my first character. It was my fault. And I turn down being revived by death, as this happens so often as a plot point in these campaigns. I now turn down any revives except from players. So what I learned with my first character is don't try to contribute to the plot. The Dungeon Master has chosen the player character who is the main character, and deviation from that storyline is basically impossible, or will lead back into it. Knowing this, I bring in my Dwarven Cleric, a classic Dwarven warrior character and generic backstory involving a dragon, and I'm good to go. Honestly, not too fussed about playing, but more interested in hanging out with friends, so I just buff. Some sessions go by, and we have a huge session, with a funeral and a boss battle with a BBEG that the party has been chasing for some time. The following session, we all just want to rest and regroup. We arrive at a tavern and start chatting and planning. I go to bring up a bit of a secret topic, so I decide to check for eavesdroppers, and sure enough, we got a hooded fella at another table, kinda listening in. Possessing no tact, I ask him loudly if he wouldn't mind minding his own business, to which I hear a voice in my head that the Dungeon Master tells me I recognize as having mildly influenced my thoughts before, and telling me to calm down by name. I am not pleased, so I animate his chair to walk him over to our table and ask him about his deal. The Dungeon Master says, "You see unnatural shadows under his hood, making his features foggy. F that, dispel magic on the illusion. Remember this dispel, as it will be relevant." So we now have a scarred elf in front of us, and I cast Detect Magic to make sure nothing else is going on. We get told that he is teeming with necromancy, and has a powerful enchantment on his weapon. I ask what the weapon is, and get told that I can't see the weapon on him. I point out that he just said that I can see a weapon, and this goes back and forth till I give up and we move on. Remember, this detect magic is running the whole time. So we start questioning him, and learn a few things through some very self-important dialogue. He is named White Death, not called, but named. He has lived for 15,000 years. He is the world's greatest bounty hunter, and he shows us a list of his bounties to prove it. He knows the entire party by name and can speak every language. I'm actually not sure if there was anything he didn't know. So we ask him what he wants, and he tells us that he knows that we are going after a bounty, as I picked up this bounty 3 sessions ago and talked about it once. But we aren't strong enough, so he proposes that we play bait, and he kills the target for an equal share. It is at this point that I recognize some similarities between the White Death and the player character that the DM plays in another campaign, called Winter. So I start to poke fun. I begin by asking how we actually know he is what he says. So far, all we know about him is that he is crap at eavesdropping. So he throws me his business card, and I write my name on a napkin and throw it back at him, asking what that proves. This goes on for a bit, with some of the other party members joining in, except the ranger, who actually liked him. The White Death keeps bragging at how he never misses, and we ask if that's because he doesn't claim what he is aiming at until after. At this point, I realize my character wouldn't be this harsh, so I tell the White Death that I am sorry. He pissed me off by eavesdropping, so if he apologizes for that, we can start fresh, to which he responds, "Never." The ranger eventually breaks through the restarted mocking to convince us to think it over during the night. The White Death agrees and leaves. I say hell no, we got more questions, and try to place him gently back into his seat, to which I'm told my hand goes through him, as he was an illusion the whole time. Now, remember Dispel Magic? Remember Detect Magic? When I question this, the Dungeon Master just smiles and says that they appeared to have no effect. We all go to bed, except the ranger, who decided to do some last-second potion shopping. While out and about, the Dungeon Master asks if some ridiculous number like 32 hits, and the ranger is like, of course. 72 points of damage, and because of a feature, the ranger is down because it did over 50% HP in damage, at which point we all hear, "I never miss," in our heads and are awoken. The session ends there, and no one is happy. We just kind of leave, and the game goes on hiatus for 4 weeks, because the Dungeon Master knows they just threw a tantrum, and is trying to find a way to fix it without admitting that he threw a tantrum, because we made fun of his character. We did get back to it, and the session to fix it made no one happy again, but there was really no way to. TLDR, we make fun of our Dungeon Master's self-insert, and he throws a tantrum and kills a player character. Yeah, one could say that OP was the a-hole here, just a little bit. But it did play into his character being annoyed at being eavesdropped on, and he did eventually extend an olive branch to the DMPC. It was then that the DMPC did not accept the apology, and the Dungeon Master stated that he was an illusion the whole time, even though OP did detect and dispel magic. Then what does the Dungeon Master do? Throw a hissy fit and kill the only character that actually kinda liked the DMPC. At least the Dungeon Master seemed a bit self-aware when he took a few weeks to play again, but still could not admit that he may have overreacted just a tad bit. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.